So welcome everyone, if you are just joining us to the Staff-Based Intranet Bootcamp. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from today. I am in the sunny UK today, but I have learnt not to brag about the UK sun, given that our next guest is joining us from very sunny Florida. So joining us today, you are here for the KPIs and everything in between, measuring the success of your intranet, where we will be discussing all things measurement today. I'm Lottie Baisley, as Jeff said, an internal communications strategic advisor at Staffbase, and I am joined today by the wonderful David Pittry. So I'll just give people another minute or so to kind of make sure you can join us. And in the meantime, if you'd like to let us know that you're here, say hello in the comments section, and you can also add your questions as we go along. We will aim for some time at the end for Q&A, but obviously we're a little bit short on time now. So if you keep your questions coming as we go along, we'll make sure that we can come to them as we go. So before we get into our very meaty measurement topic, David, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do at Davis and Company?
Hi, Lottie. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Lottie. I like to think all the cool kids stuck with us here in this session. So just in case you don't know Davis and Company, we are consultants, specialists in the employee communication space. We're employee communication strategy experts, and we help our clients with planning. We help our clients with configuring their communication function and with measurement and assessment, which is part of the reason we're here. I'm here. So Lottie, over to you.
Thank you very much, David. Yes, and for those that don't know me, I am, as I say, Lottie Baisley. I have been at Staffbase for just under 2 years now. Before that, I was actually a customer of Staffbase. So my background is internal communications and employee engagement. And now at Staffbase, I work with our customers to really gain an understanding of their business goals and their internal communication strategies to see ultimately how we can do comms better. So to kick us off today and then encourage some interaction and a bit of audience participation, we have a couple of questions for the audience. So we will kick ourselves off with a poll, which you should see coming up either side, not sure which way, but should be in the side there. So let us know, firstly, do you use metrics to assess the effectiveness of your intranet? Go for yes, absolutely I do, and I'm doing it very well. No, I don't, but it's something that I want to start doing, or who has the time to measure? We're so busy as internal comms people, we literally don't get the chance to. Something that I can personally relate to. And then let us know in the comments, take part in the poll. David, is this something that you have done in the past?
Yes, so we're seeing it's a pretty even split between yes and no. I think this is interesting, and part of the things that we hear from our clients is, I didn't go into communication to do math, and so now all of a sudden I have to worry about all of this data. So it's interesting stuff. I think, Lottie, I would love to ask the follow-up question for those. I think we have around 53% who said yes. So those among you who said yes, in the chat, in the comments, tell us how you use these metrics. What are you doing with them?
I think we have those people that are super keen on metrics. We're getting lots of exclamation marks for those with a yes. And then the ones that are saying no, maybe a bit shy, but yeah, let us know. Any thoughts in the chat? We also have a second question for you, another poll there, is do you measure the effectiveness of your internal communications program? So again, there should be another poll. Let us know yes, no, or absolutely don't even have the time to consider doing it. I can see some comments in the chat to say that we want to, so certainly something that people are keen to do. And hopefully we will be able to talk you through kind of where to get started throughout our session today. Someone in the chat here then, Kylie, reinforce return on investment to our executive leadership. Absolutely, and something that David and I actually already have teed up to talk about in the session today. See some more coming through. So again, kind of half and half, 52% no and 47% yes. So clearly we have a very even split down the middle here.
Okay. So let's set up our conversation. I want to zoom out. I think it's important to think about the context of measurement when we're talking specifically about the intranet. And I'd like to zoom out a little bit because I think that might help you and inspire your thinking about what metrics you use on the intranet specifically. So at Davis and Company, we have a model that we've been using to measure the effectiveness of internal communication. And we've defined 5 factors that determine effectiveness. And I see them as building blocks. They each build on the other. So first one is participation. Do employees access and receive communication? Do they use those communication tools? 2, are they satisfied with those tools? Do they consider them valuable? Are they convenient? Are they helpful? 3, knowledge. Are we building knowledge of the topics that are important to the organization? 4, are we influencing attitudes? For instance, do employees believe in the future of the organization? And then finally, action. Are employees taking actions, modeling the behaviors we need? Put those all together, and you have a sense of the effectiveness of employee communication. And we like to gather data in each of those 5 buckets. Now I want to zoom back in. Participation is, when it comes to the intranet, you can gather lots of data here. And this is where a tool like Staffbase can help, because you can get lots of data points that give us clues about participation. So it's not just our employees participating, but how are they participating? So Lottie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, David. Yeah, that was really insightful to kind of take a look, as you say, that sort of step back, that overall success of a communications program, or even just a communications team. So to bring that specifically back to intranets, after all, we are at the Intranet Bootcamp today. When it comes to your internal communications, sometimes the unsung heroes of your team are your channels, specifically the intranet. So as you can see here, 75% of internal comms teams are using an intranet. So of course, we can see that it is a key player when it comes to helping you get your messages out, or at least that's the plan. But with that being said, as you can see, nearly half of you are saying that it's not actually an effective form of communication, which of course is far from ideal. Maybe add your thoughts in the comments there. Does this sound like you? Have you got an intranet in place, but it's not quite doing the things that you need it to do? I have to say I was quite surprised by this figure of 42%. That's a bit higher than I would have imagined. David, is this something that you see amongst your clients? Does this surprise you at all?
It does surprise me, and I'll give you some data to maybe create another view of this. And I want to bring the employee voice in. We just completed last week, as a matter of fact, some research for a pharmaceutical company, and the intranet, and this is the front page. If you were just in the session before, the folks there, Frank, they were speaking about this idea of the front door. And we test that when we're assessing communication programs. And in this case, the intranet was tested very well. It was 3rd among a set of 6 channels. So that's great news. The other thing that we learned is that in this organization, 82% of employees said they visit that front door. That's a pretty amazing participation number. So there is value there for employees. They do use it. But as always, this quantitative data is really a diagnostic tool. It doesn't help us understand why. It helps us see some trends and issues. Sorry, Lottie, back to you.
Absolutely no, and I think it's a nice setup as well for something that I was going to talk about, is that difference between kind of just having the numbers, but also having that sort of anecdotal stuff as well.
Yes. Yes.
So this 42%, I doesn't look great, but optimistically, I'm a kind of glass half full kind of person. So I suppose that the silver lining here is that in order to be able to say whether it is an effective platform or not, that some sort of measurement must be going on somewhere, whether that is your reach, behavioral changes that you might be seeing or not, or any kind of feedback from your users. But a really key place to start when it comes to thinking about if your intranet is a success or not, we first have to define its purpose, right? So what is it there to do? Is it purely to store documents, in which case we can tick it off once all the documents are uploaded? Is it a place where you are able to communicate with your people? Is it a place where they're able to communicate with each other? There's all of these different kind of elements to that. So I find it always easier to take a step back before getting into the detail. What is the purpose of my intranet? And what would I need to measure then to be able to prove that it's fulfilling its purpose? So if we're saying then our intranet is not fulfilling its purpose, how can we change this? Or maybe more specifically, how can we use measurement to improve the effectiveness of your intranet? So when David and I were kind of discussing what format we wanted this session to take, him and I were kind of firing a lot of the same questions that we get from customers and clients that we most regularly get asked. So we decided to flip that somewhat and turn it into these myths that we often come across, and we will do our best to bust them today. David, are you ready to get into the myth busting?
Let's go.
So myth number one then we have is that just having the numbers is enough. So you've got your intranet set up, you've got the best analytics that money could buy, you put all those figures into some beautiful graphs and charts, and then you're done, right? David, what are your thoughts here? Is just having the numbers enough?
Yeah, I definitely not. I have a little story that I want to share that I think really illustrates why we can bust this myth. So one of our clients, this is an industrial manufacturer, came to me one day. I'll just back up a little bit. Every week they push out a weekly news summary. This is a fairly standard practice in employee communication. You have a title, you have a one sentence description, and you have a link back to the intranet, right? Pretty standard practice. And what this team noticed, this team of communicators, that folks were not clicking on those links. Very, very few employees were. So they knocked on my door, said, David, we're really concerned. We're not getting clicks. What's going on? It's not good. So I said, well, hold on a minute. Let's do some research to find. Let's get behind the numbers. Here we have some diagnostic information. It's telling us, maybe there's a problem. So we did some focus groups with employees. We did some follow-up survey work as well. And what we learned is that weekly digest was exactly what employees wanted. They knew it and they valued it. But because it was served up in a great way, it gave them exactly what they wanted. They didn't feel the need to click through. So even though the team was measuring success by clicks, employees were not, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a really interesting conundrum. Now, in the end, it helped the team. The team used to write beautiful 500-word articles on the intranet. So it helped the team say, hey, we can spend less time on those articles and more time on strategic thinking, strategic elements of our work. And that's exactly what they did. They moved the focus. So getting behind, seeing the color, what's behind the numbers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's a really nice story, actually, David, and really glad that you got to the bottom of it in the end. I actually had some kind of similar story in my previous role, where kind of just having the numbers was clearly not enough for me. So in my previous role, I looked after an audience of about 80% remote workers who were out and about in the field, driving vans in customer homes. So they didn't have the time to sit and read through written communications like our desk-based workers had. So we invested a lot of time and money in creating some really slick video comms, thinking that our engineers would be able to watch these whilst they quickly grabbed their lunch in their van, or whilst they were having their morning coffee before they left the house. Perfect. Created all of these lovely videos, started publishing them, and then realized that nobody was watching them. And we actually found our engagement numbers dropping quite significantly. And it wasn't until I spent the day with one of our engineers, kind of spending time with them, understanding what their role was and how they use the platform. And I said to him, hey, what do you think of our cool new videos that we've been producing? And he point blank told me he hadn't watched any of them. So not ideal, but as I say, that's what the numbers were telling me. So I asked him, why not? And what he told me was that the majority of the time, the engineers are reading communications whilst they're in the customers' homes waiting for a process to happen. So they usually have about 10 minutes to kill here, which is great because that means they can sit and they can read through the communications on their phone at this time. But they didn't want to have to stick headphones on and start watching a video whilst they're sat on the customer's couch. And equally, they didn't want to not put headphones on and just sit on the customer's couch watching this video out loud. So again, it was, I had these numbers there and I could see that there was something wrong, but it wasn't until I had that anecdotal evidence that really kind of helped me understand what was going on here. And on a similar level, I think context is something that's really, really important when it comes to numbers. So here we have a nice looking graph. If I show you this graph with average readers for January, what does it tell me? Well, it tells me that we had 1,000 readers in January. But what's next? David, if you and I were in an internal communications team together and I showed you this slide and I said, this is the numbers for January, what would you think?
Sounds nice. How many employees do we have?
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of those things where just seeing this number alone is really not helpful. But actually, if I give you a bit more context here, so I can see the case numbers for the rest of the year, we can see actually January is a lot below average. And equally, we could use this as a percentage. So if we've got, 1,050 employees, this is great because everyone's gone there. But actually, if we have 80,000 employees, this number doesn't look good for us. So gathering data over a period of time can really help you to set your own benchmarks too. And of course, once we have the numbers, we've made our graphs, we've set our KPIs. Now we need to know what to do with the numbers. So how can we improve these? So I just really quickly wanted to show you this slide from staff-based customer Hager. And in my opinion, this is a really nice, simple visual slide that they create for their team using metrics and KPIs, following this kind of stop, start, continue model with the headlines at the top. So this is a really nice, clear example of how you can make sure that you have clear actions that will help you to achieve these goals. So myth number one, can we consider it busted, do you think, David?
Yes, let's do it. I hope so.
Fingers crossed. Let us know your thoughts. And as I say, please keep any questions coming in the chat and keeping my eye on them as we go along. So myth number two then is that you need to be measuring absolutely everything. David, why is this a myth?
Well, I think it's just too much. So we don't have time to measure everything. That's number one. But number two, I think certainly we have half of the people in the session said they don't measure. So it feels like way too much, very daunting to say, okay, now I need to measure everything. To go from 0 to 100, I don't think it's possible. And when we consult with our clients on measurement, we say, let's take a little step. Let's try some measurement. Let's try doing this over here, and then keep building and building and building. So I don't think you need to measure everything, but I think the important part of this is to start with two things. First of all, have you set really specific objectives for your function for employee communication? That's one, because if they're very specific, you can measure them. If it's an objective like we want employees to be excited about topic X, that's not an objective. If we want to build their knowledge, that is an objective, and we want them to be able to take action, that's an objective. Two, you need to decide what you want to do with this data. Is it just for your internal communication team, and we will make decisions based on the data? Or perhaps you want to share it with stakeholders. Maybe it's a person you work with regularly in IT or HR. Maybe you want to influence the leadership team. When you make those decisions, then that helps you decide how far to go with measurement.
Great point. And actually something that we will come on to again is that difference of What do we report, and what do we report to who's interested in what, and what kind of level of granularity do we go into here. So myth number 2, considered busted. And then finally, the last myth that we're going to bust.
I like that we get to decide if it's busted or not.
Yeah, we're marking our own homework here, David, but I'm hoping people are agreeing with us. Final myth of the day then is that success looks the same for everyone. So I know that that's not the case. We've already just spoken about kind of what success looks like for your different stakeholders. But David, maybe you're kind of taking a step back from this. What does that look? What does this mean for you? Success looks the same.
Again, I think it's important to zoom out. I know we're focused on intranet, but if we zoom out, the role of employee communication can vary by organization to organization. There are certainly things that are common, that I believe are common: encouraging a sense of community, building recognition, building trust in senior leadership, building knowledge of the strategic plan or the priorities. Those sorts of things are common across industries. But then there's our elements that are based on your business and what the business needs to achieve, and how employee communication supports those goals. So I think it's really important to understand what that is, what the role of your function is, and then how does the intranet plug into that? Lottie?
Thank you, David. I'm glad you asked the question. So David is obviously the kind of zoomer outer, whereas I'm a little bit more zoomer inner. So on a slightly more granular level then, this is a slide that we often show to customers and clients when they ask the $1 million question: how do I make my intranet a success? Firstly, we need to consider what it is that we should be measuring. So you can see I've got 4 columns across here. We've got reach, we've got usage, we've got interaction, and user satisfaction. Some of the elements similar to David's 5-step that he mentioned earlier. And it's also probably worth mentioning that these pillars work in a kind of funnel. So, for example, if your reach figures are low, you'll probably find that the other figures get progressively lower. So it's worth kind of taking a step back and having a think where it is you might want to start when it comes to these things. And then I'll really quickly just run through a couple of things that you can do to improve. So if you have low reach, it might be that your entry requirements are too high. It might be simply that it's just a bit too tricky for people to log in, so that they've given up. When it comes to usage, it's obviously people have managed to make it into the intranet. You can see that they've logged in, but for whatever reason, they're not coming back and using the platform. So here is where you should maybe start to look at things like relevancy. Is the content personalized to people? And is there anything that you can make exclusive to the intranet? So things that people can't find elsewhere that will help to drive that usage. And then we have interaction. So do the people have the ability to interact with your content? Can they comment? Can they like? Can they even create their own content to share with colleagues? And also, if people are interacting with your content, are you making sure that you are responding to that? So if people are asking questions on an article, are you getting back to those people? And lastly, to David's point earlier about satisfaction, are your people satisfied with the platform? Make sure that you are regularly asking for any feedback on the platform. What improvements would your users like to see? And even something like, is there any further training that you can give your content creators to make sure that your content is at the top of its game? And another one from our customer Haga here. So they certainly deserve a gold star for their measurement and reporting efforts here, as this is the second slide I'm using of theirs. But this I really like is an example of a matrix. So again, what we were talking about earlier in terms of what should you be reporting to stakeholders, but actually, can you set your stakeholders' goals as well as just the internal communications team? So here's a matrix that they've created to show their macro and their micro targets. So these are the targets that are relevant to their senior leaders on the macro side. The micro ones are specific to the comms team and the content creators. So you can see here that each person, or kind of each group of people, have different targets. And then I also really like that they've split their KPIs into 5 sections here. So usability kind of covers overall targets. So that might change based on the time of year. It might be a certain campaign that they've got going out. It might be that they're launching new functionality within the platform. Rollout then is how many people are physically registered to the platform. Content targets talk about interaction with content, so about engaging with content and encouraging comments. Commitment is all about interaction targets for the leadership team. So here I really like that they have specifically set targets for the senior leadership team to actually go into the platform, to be posting themselves and to be interacting with people that are also commenting in there. And then last one, we have kind of community targets, which are target for creating content within the platform. For leaders, this is how many articles they need to create, but actually on this macro level, it's attendance of the local content editors to the regular team meetings. So here we can clearly see that success isn't the same for everyone, even within a business, let alone within an industry or an intranet ever. Of course, there is only so much that we can cover in 30 minutes. So before we get into your questions, as I say, please pop some in the chat. David has some further reading for you all to do.
Yeah, as a gift from Davis and Company to everyone who joined us here on the main stage, we have a copy of our book called "What's Next: 9 Ways to Reinvent Employee Communication." So if you're interested, my colleague Vaish will, Kelly did. Kelly put in the URL in the comments. So feel free to follow the link, and you can download a free copy of the ebook.
Thank you very much, David. And now we have 1 minute and luckily one question. So I'm going to read it super quick and I'm going to fire it across to you. But Kimberly has said, I'd love to know, when you're layering your communications, how often do you repeat information across channels instead of creating exclusive content for intranet channels?
Oh, this is a really tough one. I'll answer it let me start with, we get feedback often from employees when we're doing research that they hate it when stuff is repeated. So I read it over here and I see it again. It's the same thing. And in essence, they're saying, why are you wasting my time? Right? Now, there is benefit to repeating, but how I like to think about it is interpreting it. So for example, the CEO may talk about the vision or the plan for the year, and then the next layer might say, here's how that applies to our team. They're not necessarily repeating it, but they're adding context. And then you could even take that a step further, where a manager could say, remember what the CEO said? Well, here's what it means, and what our VP of blah, blah, blah said. Here's how that applies to us, this team. So it's not necessarily repeating, but it's adding context, it's interpreting, it's translating, and keeping the message going.
Perfect. And stuck to time, David, as well. But I really like that idea of, we're not necessarily repeating the exact same message. We're repeating this theme, but in kind of different ways, as you say, increase the relevancy, increase the context. So the same message is still getting across, but we're not just delivering the same message over.